The light up on the left. I received this. I'm Viv Hawkins, and we're here for a Releasing Ministry Alliance Opps call. And I would expect that we may have others joining us, and it may be the group that's here. So maybe what we can do is introduce ourselves and say where we're calling in from. And I'm Viv, and I'm here in Philadelphia, and very grateful to be with the rest of you.
So, and I'm Patti. I'm Patti Nesbitt. I am calling in from Sperryville, Virginia, on the edge of the Blue Ridge Mountains, Shenandoah National Park, and I had been crossed twice this week by bears. I'm a member of Sandy Spring meeting.
I'm Joan Liversidge, calling in from Sandy Spring, Maryland.
And I'm Wendy Cooler. I'm calling in from Greenbelt, Maryland, which is a New Deal era suburb of Washington, D.C. And I am a member of Sandy Spring monthly meeting.
I see I have nothing but numbers and letters. My name is Dorothy Broom. I'm calling in from Australia, from Canberra Regional Meeting, where I'm a member of the Ministry Committee.
Wonderful to have you.
Thank you.
What time is it there, Dorothy?
It's 10 in the morning.
All right. Well, have a good Thursday.
Yes, exactly. I was alerted to this by Sally Kingsland, whom some of you may know. She lived in California for several years, but is now back in Canberra.
Great. So we also have Marcel and someone on the phone. I don't know if that's you, Janet.
I had seen a picture of Janet Huff, and
Right.
then it went, yeah.
So we have someone from 207-370-1436.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't hear me when I mute myself, can you? This is Janet. I'm the 207 number.
Great.
I am on a boat landing in Passadumkeag, Maine, on the side of the Penobscot River, and the sun is just setting. I am a former member of Sandy Spring Meeting, currently a member of Cobb's Cook Meeting, and I decided that my phone was not going to have enough charge if I tried to do a video call, so I decided I'd do it just the telephone way.
Great.
Glad to have you.
And I'm Marcel Martin from Swarthmore Meeting, living in Chester, Pennsylvania.
Wonderful. So it's great to have you. As I mentioned before, some of you got on. I've received regrets from a number of people, and it may be that we have others who yet join us. Regardless, in the spirit of open space, perhaps those who are here are meant to be here, and I'm very much looking forward to our conversation today and sharing what we know and sharing anything that we know beyond this conversation. So Releasing Ministry Alliance is I'd like to just give a brief introduction. It's a platform to publicize and help source ministries. And those at the present time are those within the Religious Society of Friends. I expect that it will be a larger net than that, because I believe that the Fisher person doesn't have just halibut or something like that. Which is not to say that I see you as a school of fish by any means. if I don't have your email address, and that might be true for Dorothy, if you would input it in the chat, which you can get to by moving your cursor on the screen.
Oh, yes.
You see the
I
chat.
see it. Yep.
Click on that, and then it'll come up somewhere, and you can go down and click on there and send it. You see something on your screen there, Dorothy?
I'm not getting a chat thing yet, but
Okay, well,
yeah.
maybe you can simply tell it to me then. And
Yes, all right. Yeah, it's pretty easy. Dorothy, DOROTHY dot Broom, BROOM, at gmail.com.
Gmail, G as in God, or
Yeah, just plain old gmail.com. Yep.
right. I'm glad that it's not anything like the user idea you're using, EOFQs.
I've got no idea what generated that. Absolutely none. Maybe it's, oh, look, who knows?
Right, wonderful. Okay.
A chat window will probably appear after we leave the meeting.
Oh, that may be the case. In any event, I'll be, if it's all right, I'll include you on the email list for these Opps calls, and we'll be distributing some resources I would expect after the call, in addition to a link for the recording, which is presently active. So today we're going to hear about under the care of a meeting, and recently Wendy's ministry of the family ministry,
Quaker Family Life, yeah.
right, is has come under the care of Sandy Springs after some conversation and wrestling with the question of what does this mean in Sandy Springs and to some extent in Baltimore Yearly Meeting. So we're going to hear from Patti first, who is quite active. Patti Nesbitt is quite active with Baltimore Yearly Meeting, and especially with the intervisitation program that is operative there. We'll then hear from Joan Liversidge, who has been wonderfully active with Sandy Spring, as has Patti to an extent, and Wendy about what it has been like for her in certain ways. And then we'll circle back to Patti, who travels in the ministry. Patti, is it with a minute from Sandy Spring?
And the yearly meeting, yeah.
Okay. And we'll have a time to share beyond that, and a time for question and answers. Patti, Joan, was it you that sent me the resources?
I did send you some, yep. I sent you our Embracing Ministry from BYM. And then, yeah.
And so we'll be sending out an email with some different documents that are on this topic of under the care from various different meetings. And let's step into it.
Okay, good. Well, I want to say that, first of all, thanks a lot. This has been both personal and a personal affirmation that you're having the coordinated conversations, because it helps elevate the ministry that we've been doing. And I've really been called to focus on some of the clerking responsibilities that have been needed in Baltimore Yearly Meeting to clerk the intervisitation working group. And so let me start with that and just kind of lay out what our yearly meeting has done by way of supporting ministry under the care of meetings, local monthly meetings, and the yearly meeting. And I'll first start by talking about the intervisitation program. Has been going on for at least 15 years. And each year it has grown in participation, and a very lively kind of core group which started it. And Joan was one of the people that had the original vision to get this rolling. Those people have been instrumental in maintaining the flow, but there's been an enormous influx of new energy in the last couple of years. We now have, under the care of the yearly meeting and monthly meetings, 11 different friends who have travel minutes to carry out particular types of ministry that they've been led to. And they vary from traveling overseas to traveling within our country with to be with yearly meetings or monthly meetings, and then we have one that has a ministry of hospitality and playfulness, and he plays the harp for meetings, and it's a community builder activity. So he has a ministry of community building among people that he works with, that he goes to play and gives concerts for, that are free concerts. He sees that as an essential part of peacemaking. So, we welcome that kind of diversity. We have people that have gone in the last year to 6 different countries, 19 different monthly meetings, and 15 some different yearly meetings, and then many Quaker organizations. And in addition to that, the yearly meeting has given us a budget. We offer support to friends from outside our yearly meeting to come to our annual sessions. And last year we had friends from 8 other yearly meetings that came to our yearly meeting that were supported by the intervisitation program. Now, and the thing that I've been fascinated by is, like, when I was in Mount Eden in Auckland meeting just a couple months ago, I met a man from Sweden who had been to our yearly meeting last year and would be there this year. It was like, whoa. And, it's like, that's amazing. How'd you get to, and how do you know Peggy Dyson Cobb? And it's like, well, boy, it's a small world. That's fascinating to me how, he is just one person that I know of personally that has come to our yearly meeting that's not traveled through our intervisitation program. And I can name several friends in our yearly meeting who have ministries that go out to other monthly meetings or yearly meetings that do not have travel minutes either. Mm-hmm. So the other thing I want to describe is what's the organizational piece to put in place someone's being under the care of a meeting or a yearly meeting. And we encourage everyone to start, senses they have a leading in this direction, to start with a clearness committee. And, after 1 or 2 meetings, often the clearness is reached, and that group of people then support the idea of writing a travel minute that then is taken to ministry and council in the local level, the local monthly meeting. And, as clearness is sought in every step of the committee, whether it's, the clearness committee or the ministry and council, as clearness is reached, then the ministry and council would bring to the floor the monthly meeting to say, this is our discernment. We would like to offer this, and is the monthly meeting in agreement? Now, if the friend is going to travel to monthly meetings, that's enough. But if the friend is going from our yearly meeting to another yearly meeting, then we recommend that the yearly meeting's endorsement is also sought. So that travel minute then would then go to interim meeting or yearly meeting, whichever the time of the year it is, and have the body at that time discern and approve, or approve an endorsement. So one of the things that we request is that there's accountability. And that is achieved by, and honestly, we're growing into this. So this is being, everyone is at a different phase of this, but it is achieved by primarily having an ongoing support committee. In the School of the Spirit, we call this an oversight committee. I know some people call it spiritual care committees. Some people just call it support committees. The concept is, 2 to 3 people, or maybe 4, as way opens, as choice of the individual person, would sit in prayer to help discern how God's working in that person's life, and how divine spirit is leading that person in terms of their ministry, and challenge, support, nurture, encourage, empower, whatever word wants to be is appropriate at that particular time, depending upon the questions that comes up. But when other people are listening with you about how God is leading us in our lives, I think our relationship with our ministry is deepened, and our understanding of what we're doing is deepened, and often broadened at the same time. In addition to that, the monthly meeting is actually, because they're the ones who write the travel minute, they actually, if you can say it, they own the travel minute. So for instance, we just returned from New Zealand and Australia. And all of the people who signed our travel minute are on the back of there. I will take a PDF of it, or make a copy, make a PDF, and submit it to the yearly meeting as well as to the monthly meeting. And it actually should go back to ministry and council in the monthly meeting. Our support committee will encourage us to go on and present to the monthly meeting what kind of work we did, what kind of learning we had, what kind of challenges. And, of course, we arrived in the Southern Hemisphere the day of the Christchurch shootings. So there will be some, we went to the mosque, and there will be some rich material that comes out of that we'll bring back to the monthly meeting and the yearly meeting. So, but the accountability is something that's really key, that the support committee is the key link to that. So let me leave it at that, and we can move on and certainly come back later.
Welcome, Ruby. We're hearing from, we just heard from Patti, our darling. We just heard from Patti Nesbitt, and she was talking about Baltimore Yearly Meeting a little bit, and its intervisitation program. Joan is going to now talk about how Sandy Spring is doing this kind of thing at the local level.
Mm-hmm. So, good evening and good morning to our friends in Australia. I've been worshiping at Sandy Spring for 22 years now, and I do not recall taking a ministry of the depth and breadth of Wendy's under our care in those 22 years. So this was a big event for us. And as I've been reflecting on it, I was asked to talk about what were the steps that we took. And I realized, Wendy, that you and I knew each other for many years in several different venues, including that first workshop. And then we were on your marriage committee. And along the way, Wendy would tell me about this emerging ministry. So I was aware of it as it was developing. And so at the time, Wendy, when you were ready to move forward and you wanted care and support and accountability, you weren't yet a member of Sandy Spring. So you went to the Ministry and Pastoral Care Committee of Baltimore Yearly Meeting, and they provided clearness for you and took this ministry under the care just at the beginning of it until Sandy Spring could step in, hopefully step in. I mean, that was another faith step, right?
Mm-hmm.
What if we had not stepped up? That's a question.
And to be clear, the issue wasn't just that I wasn't a member of Sandy Spring. I had moved. I had moved from one monthly meeting to Sandy Spring. So I was actually a very new attender at Sandy Spring.
Right. So people didn't know you, nor did they know your ministry. Well, you went to Thursday night meeting, but it's a small meeting. So the first step on ministry and council, when you came to ministry and council, was two of us, I think, shepherded this process. One was Tom Klaus, who was a member of Ministry and Pastoral Care and had been part of that discernment with you. And then myself, who knew you and knew this ministry, and the rest of the people on our committee didn't.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't
Was Tom, can I ask, was Tom part of the yearly meeting, Ministry and Council, or the same? Okay,
Oh,
so he was on both committees. Okay, all right.
It's
Thanks.
very fortuitous, or maybe spirit-led and God ordained, that both Tom and I were on ministry and council at Sandy Spring so that we could do this, what I call shepherding of this process. And over the years of being with friends, and one of the most difficult things I was involved with in Sandy Spring was the minute on same-sex marriage that we approved just 7 years ago, I think. And it had lain for 10 years, nobody talked about it because it was too hot to touch. And what I learned in that process is that you have to go slowly and you have to educate and give people time. So I think, Wendy, I suggested to you and then to the committee that you come even before your membership was approved.
Mm-hmm.
And people said to me, oh no, we should wait. And so with this in mind, this is a process. It's going to take some time. I thought it should get started. So we did start it. And then your membership was approved shortly thereafter. And so Wendy came to our ministry and council meetings, introduced herself, introduced the ministry. So people got to know you at that level. So there were several opportunities for that. One of the things that I think I did was to try to keep it on the agenda of ministry and council, because we all know how busy our committees get and those things easily fall off, especially if they're not imminent. So keeping it on the agenda so that we were checking in all the time. We got to the point of appointing a clearness committee. And I very carefully, I didn't step up to ask to be on it, didn't think I should have been on it, because at that point it was other people needed to know you and needed to know this ministry. So that happened. The clearness committee, they came back to ministry and council, reported back. We had another discernment in our committee without you there.
Mm-hmm.
And we're ready to write a minute that then went to the meeting for business. Then I believe we asked you to come to meeting for business too, and begin to tell people about this. And so you can speak to this, whether people in the meeting started to seek you out and ask you about this. I'm hoping that did happen, because we presented it to the meeting for business 1 month, we held it over a second month, and it was approved. I'm not sure that friends at Sandy Spring really know what they approved. And when you came back a couple of weeks ago and said, I'm back from my travels for the work that you all sent me to do, was such a perfect way of saying it, because I'm not sure that friends at our meeting really get what this means, because as I said, in the last 22 years, I don't recall having an experience like this, except for intervisitation. Those of us who traveled in intervisitation went to the ministry and council, asked for clearness, discernment, travel minutes, but ministry and council had to be educated for that too, because they didn't know what to do. But that's small compared to, I think, what Wendy is. So we then appointed an anchor committee, and we're calling it an anchor committee. And the question is, why did we choose that? And I'm not sure why. And Wendy might talk about that. I know that I think I had talked about an anchor committee and used FGC resources about anchor committee with the committee. That may have been what somebody picked up on and decided that was a good thing to call it. So the right people in the right place at the right time. Way opened.
Mhm. Wonderful, thank you.
So, do you want me to talk now, Viv?
Sure,
Um,
if that's
so,
right to you.
yeah. So this experience for me has been really one of being held and cared for in a very different way than I have ever experienced. While we were preparing for this call, I identified Patti and Joan as having eldered me for the first time. It really occurred to me that what happened over the last few years was an eldering experience. That I was friends with Joan first. I met Joan the same day I met my husband. And Joan was very curious about me and my ministry. I was very drawn initially to a Quaker response to domestic abuse, and that evolved over time into an interest in family life in general, the spiritual lives of families. And it has evolved further into an intense interest in how meetings provide pastoral care for one another. It is an enormous undertaking. I can't even get into it all, but you know, last summer and this summer, both, I've been visiting 8 yearly meetings. Increasingly, I get invited to speak. I became the Cadbury Scholar at Pendle Hill, so I'm writing a book. I'm doing lots of things I don't really know how to do. And you know, throughout this process, I feel like Joan and Patti have aggressively sought me out, asked what I was doing, invited me to all kinds of different committee meetings. You know, however they were serving, they invited me to come and speak. I'm a very shy person, really. I sort of have like 2 modes. I'm either sort of like being very bold because I feel like I have to be, but my resting phase is pretty shy. And I feel like part of their eldering has been to draw me out of that shyness and to share what I'm thinking about with my own voice. And I learned from this experience that it was okay to be vulnerable, and it was okay not to know what I was doing, and to say that to people. and you know, over and over and over again, friends have stepped up to help financially and spiritually and given their time. My anchor committee is going to meet once a month starting in September, because at this point that really is the level of support I need. But I have not had that level of institutional support up until right now. When the yearly meeting held my ministry, I had a support committee and I met with them a few times, but I want to stress that it's very wise to have the support come from the monthly meeting, because, in the yearly meeting, we live, hours and hours and hours apart from one another. It was very hard for us to meet and talk about the ministry and with the same kind of intimacy and depth that my anchor committee is going to be able to. I was asked to tell a specific story about what being held by the meeting has meant to me. But the truth is, being held by the meeting is really in its infancy, as we heard. And the experience that I'm really prepared to talk about is this, aggressive mentoring and eldering that I received. And I think the story I want to share is of, I had done a qualitative research project. I traveled the country. I talked to 92 friends about the quality of their family lives and how that was connected to the monthly and yearly meetings they were a part of. The results of that were very tender and surprising to me. The results of that really were that there are lots of things that we don't talk about inside of our meetings. So I came back with that result and I was starting to process that internally. And I wrote a draft of the research. I'm a seminarian. I'm a student at Earlham School of Religion who had also supervised the research. I wrote a draft and turned it in to my professor, who loved it. And that felt very good. I'm from a working class background. When my academic work is praised, that feels enormously good to me. And he wanted to publish it in another form in a Quaker journal. And this really appealed to me. I wanted this. I wanted this very, very badly. It appealed to me in so many different ways. I felt that it would be good for the work. It would be, amplifying this message. And also it just felt good, honestly. And the problem was that he wanted me to present solutions to these incredibly complicated, subtle problems that, I really was only prepared to sort of bear witness to. And he wanted it in a week. I have lots of opinions, and I could have given those opinions, but it felt wrong to me. But I wanted this thing. And it just so happened that Patti had invited me to a committee meeting at the monthly meeting. We weren't going to talk about that. This was not a support committee meeting. They just wanted to hear from me. She invited me. I went. I presented. And I got some feedback. And then Patti asked me, "What is concerning you right now?" And this whole story just came out of me. Well, right now I'm thinking about what my professor said, and I'm thinking about how much I want to write this journal article, and I'm thinking about how impossible that sounds and how wrong that feels. And it was like an impromptu clearness committee. But it was also an experience of eldering, in that in a clearness committee, you're really listening to yourself. And I certainly could hear myself say those things, but I also got a lot of feedback from the people in that room. And the feedback was very strong and very no. And I feel like if I hadn't had that experience, I probably would have spent that week trying to turn out a subpar journal article that would have been published, and it wouldn't have done the ministry any good. So I feel like what the process, in some ways, I've been held by the meeting for a long time. it's just sort of like the last time this small group got together to talk, I said it's sort of like getting married, where you're just sort of saying what is, because I have felt the meeting's commitment to this ministry for a long time, and we just formalized it, and it does feel different than just receiving informal support. I know that this commitment is real and it's long-standing now, and it goes both ways. But that informal, you know, mentoring and eldering has really meant the world to me. And I see the anchor committee that I've been given as really being my conduit in the relationship between the ministry and the monthly meeting. As the public minister carrying this ministry right now, I see that it doesn't belong to me. I see that it belongs to the monthly meeting, and that I am in negotiation with the meeting, and that this group of friends is how I'm in negotiation with them.
Thank you. So I wonder if we might settle into a little worship, and if anyone has something that they would like to add or ask, feel free to do that from that kind of worship sharing sort of place.
Well, I'd like to ask if the kind of meaning we're ascribing to under the care of relative to ministers or a particular ministry is the same as what we mean when we talk about a meeting taking a marriage under their care.
I think there's some distinctions. This is Ruby Brace.
Tell us more.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Can you hear us?
The difference in the marriage and taking a minister under care. For me, a marriage is the union of the two people that the meeting agrees to hold in a container of holiness and sanctity, supporting through the ups and downs in that union. Alternatively, a minister in the care of a meeting is holding both the person and the spirit working through the person in service to others. And those others are people both in the meeting as well as those who are served outside the meeting. I travel with a minute from my meeting and have been doing so for a lot of years. I go into prisons where I go seeking to have the Spirit show me how to be in service to those who are incarcerated. I've gone travel. Can you still hear me? I see a phone that suddenly popped up. I travel to other meetings, and I've been called into meetings when there's been such brokenness, and the desire is always to go with such clarity regarding the love of the divine, love of myself, love of the people in the meeting, modeling the way that they can begin to love and hold each other. And then stewardship regarding resources. that is so much broader than simply holding the couple who
Right.
have committed to a marriage.
Right.
I often find,
Ruby, you're muted now. I'll unmute you. You're fine.
Good.
and so those are the key distinctions. One, to hold the two people, and then to hold the work of the minister who travels
Right.
filled with the spirit of the divine, going to minister to the needs of individuals and collectives.
Beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
One of the similarities that Wendy mentioned is the reciprocity, that a couple under the care, and this often over the years, it doesn't often happen that the couple will seek out their committee. They don't understand that gift, I don't think, but both the minister and the ministry and a couple under the care, it is a two-way street. It's a reciprocal relationship. And Lindy, I think you said that very beautifully, and that you understand that. And the process for Sandy Spring will be that others understand it too as we go along down this path.
I feel like, yeah, I feel like one I have learned from this process is that the kind of infrastructure that Quakers tend to focus on is important. That developing that capacity in institutional ways is very important. But in my situation, the will was there. I mean, this was really a 3-year-long process between, you know, the time I talked to the yearly meeting and now. I think that all of the infrastructure in the world would not have carried us to where we are today without the loving nature of this experience, I think was the most important thing.
Thanks. Marcel, I saw that you had unmuted yourself. Were you?
Yes. Wendy, you said you feel you're in negotiation with the meeting, presumably about your ministry, and I wonder what you mean by that.
I mean that, well, in any healthy relationship, I think that you're in negotiation with the person that you're in relationship with. I mean that I am going to have to learn how to not make decisions about my ministry without consulting my anchor committee. that I have an intention to do that, but you know, I am used to, you know, being, even though I have received all this eldering and everything, I'm also like the captain of my own ship. I am really preparing myself to lay down that captainship. And to check in with my anchor committee before I make major decisions about what I'm doing. And I see myself as acting on behalf of the monthly meeting. So I feel that the monthly meeting has, if they really support this ministry, I think it's fair for me to have high expectations about what level commitment they will express to me. that I need to nurture this relationship and respect this relationship, and the monthly meeting also needs to nurture and respect this relationship. That there's an intentionality to what we have just entered into.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
What's happening down under? Is there a conversation about this kind of thing? Is there a practice? I know that we had a brief conversation with Patti about Elaine Emily having traveled along with others, and so I know that eldering is known to, and I've had the opportunity to be with some friends from Australia when I've been in India. So help us out with what's going on in your neck of the woods.
Gosh, I could possibly be the worst person to answer that question. My sense of it is that, as you can imagine, there's one yearly meeting in Australia on a continent geographically the size of the United States. So we're a pretty scattered bunch. And small. My sense is that although we have had the experience of Elaine Emily coming to Australia on 2 or 3 occasions, I think, that largely there isn't, and I'm quite prepared for someone with more knowledge to tell me I'm completely mistaken about this. My sense is that there isn't a kind of a tradition and an architecture of the kind that you all have been discussing today amongst Australian friends. My sense is that individuals or occasionally couples kind of develop a leading, and they might take it to a clearness committee in their, we call them regional meetings, which I think is about the equivalent of your monthly meetings. But they might very well receive a traveling minute of some kind from the regional meeting, but that there isn't any kind of pattern to that. So, having met, I presume, Ronis Chapman or Michael Searle in India, that has arisen from Ronis's service to FWCC and what they've learned from that. And I guess I can think of a small 1-digit number of other cases. We had a friend, actually from Canberra Regional Meeting, who had a powerful leading to go and act as a human shield in Palestine. And as you can imagine, that raised great questions in the regional meeting, but she eventually did go with both spiritual and some financial support from Canberra Regional Meeting. She has subsequently died, not of anything related to that ministry, but so unfortunately I can't say, oh, I'll go and ask her what that was like. But yes, I think it's very, very much more ad lib and lacking in the kind of structured support that you have been talking about. That sounds extremely wise to me.
I can say, Dorothy, that I forget, Julie Walpole and I were talking, and I recently submitted an article to Australian Friend on intervisitation, and she wanted to, she encouraged that we stayed with them for a weekend recently, and she's in Tasmania. And David Johnson and I talked about it when I was at Silver Wattle.
Right.
And was really wanting to have an active interest in learning more about inner visitation, not so much the travel minute piece, but the, how does this work? Recognizing the power of travel ministry historically, and the need for encouraging more cross-fertilization, if you would, and travel among friends in disparate areas to nurture to every one of us who was, at a distance from a larger monthly or regional meeting.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Ruby, I'm not sure which meeting, which yearly meeting you're a member of.
I'm a member of the Wilmington Friends meeting in Wilmington, North Carolina. I'm the North Carolina Yearly Meeting conservative. In fact, we have our gathering starting on Thursday, and I'll be leading Bible study for this year's yearly meeting.
Wow, they'll be blessed.
And it's been wonderful to be in preparation.
What's the practice there in North Carolina yearly meeting? And Marcel and Janet, maybe you can come in after we hear a little bit about that with what you know in Philadelphia yearly meeting and New England yearly meeting and so on. Ruby, in North Carolina yearly meeting conservative, the care of ministry is, you hold a minute, for instance.
Yes. Maybe 10 years ago, I was given a minute to travel. At that time, I was going back and forth to a Marine Corps brig to see conscientious objectors. And then I started traveling to respond to invitations to come to support meetings where there was conflict. And I've had occasion to speak for yearly meetings, New York yearly meeting for their annual gathering. And so across the years, to just hold me in the work and prayer, truly given the travel, both the travel and the work in service to the people and the regions, because the meetings don't exist in isolation. And there's always a desire energetically to have the Spirit work in the members of the meetings in ways that will prepare them to be like seed corn in their communities to help with issues, many that are just pressing right now. And I find that it requires this much, even where I live, to be present in ways that reflect God's love as opposed to just what we can do mentally to try to develop answers to issues that often divide. And so I just remain really prayerful around my own thoughts, words, my actions, with a desire to help model the way and to be in concert with others as we co-create, to hear, to take what we've heard from the Spirit and be responsive with actions that are not just driven based on worldly need, but based on the divine's leadings and calls.
Beautiful. Okay, I'm seeing a chat that says Marcel needs to leave. Okay, Marcel, thank you for being with us.
Bye, Marcel.
See you soon.
See you in a couple weeks.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
Good night.
Good night.
All the best, Marcel. Good to see you, having not seen you in a long time.
It's been a while. Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Janet, would you care to say anything about what you know of New England Yearly Meetings practice, which I personally believe is one of the exemplars in the East Coast Yearly Meetings, at least, of the U.S.?
Well, actually, what I want to say first is something that is a noticing of something I think it's important to keep in our hearts and minds, how our meetings are perfectly and imperfectly changing over time in response to changing conditions in the world. And so I have been a frequent visitor to Sandy Springs since I was a teenager, when I lived in Sandy Springs. And there has been a big change in the world around Sandy Springs. I'm sorry, I'm not very articulate, but it became much more suburban, for one thing. Many more people, much wealthier, and still always ranges of wealth. And it's best, I think, our meetings are responding now to an increased urgency that people are feeling to commit lives to respond to Spirit. In the particular way that's manifesting now is in endorsing particular gifts of ministry or leadings or travel minutes. In the 70s, it was often through somebody working full-time for AFSC, and in other words, it's been there, but in different manifestations. And I think that different forms are being revived, and then, or things are tried, and then they get modified in response to, what are we really hearing being called for here? And I think of that, the Baltimore Yearly Meetings travel intervisitation ministry in that way, which really had a very specific origin around the relationship with Friends United Meeting, but has grown and produced riches and morphed and evolved. I think that School of the Spirit was a place that a lot of people learned more about anchor committees and support committees. The recent thing in New England was that there was a yearly meeting retirement nursing home, really, that the yearly meeting decided really, we can't manage this properly. And they sold it, and with that money said, we want to fund ministry. So they put into place, and this is only in the last 5 years, I think, a really significant process for funding people and meetings to do projects or other things, support ministry. And there's a comfort level with talking about ministry, things as ministry, that I think is also grown. There's a comfort level with talking about people eldering and having that mean something positive that has grown over the last 15 years, 10 years. I don't know how long. So I think that's the thing that's striking me most tonight, is how what Patti and Joan and Wendy have shared is a particular confluence of things that has a degree of newness and importance. There's a shift of need from when, so I'm in the second half of my 60s, and when I arrived in Sandy Spring as a 12-year-old, I had a handful of friends whose grandparents and great-grandparents had been members of the meeting, if not great-great-grandparents. And those people were still all living in the community or in the graveyard. So it was a different community where people knew each other in a different way, and a different form of caring for one another. No relationship was happening, and it was transitioning. And I think it's wonderful that looking at it more seriously and saying, what can we really do with this complexity of families that we have now, and how do we really dig into the intergenerational trauma of so many, all of us really, but different degrees and different people. How do we really dig into questions of white supremacy culture and the genocidal taking of land from indigenous peoples? And those are really huge things that are coming up now. So I'm thinking about that because that's where I am, but that's wandered off your topic. But three things New England Yearly Meeting this year will be really looking at in sessions are white supremacy, repudiating the doctrine of discovery, what next, having done that some years ago, and the climate crisis.
Right. And thank you, Janet, for making mention of the New England Yearly Meeting Fund. That's the both the Legacy Fund and the Future Fund, or something to that effect, which we'll hear about if you're on a call with this Releasing Ministry Opps in September. Susanna Schell, who is the co-clerk of that committee, will be present with others to talk about how New England Yearly Meeting took those funds from the sale of the nursing home, and the way that I see it are sort of plowing it into into ministry among friends, and how that can serve the yearly meeting. So we're at a place where, if we're willing, we could thank one another for the time that we've taken together. I certainly am interested in expressing my deep gratitude to all of you for being here this evening. And to let you know that this will be shared so that others who were unable to join us can witness to what was offered here.
Wonderful.
Yeah, thanks for inviting us.
Thank you all, and thank you, Viv.
Yeah, and for coordinating. Yeah.
And thank you for shepherding us so skillfully, Viv.
Thank you all for coming. It was delightful.
And I'm very grateful for your ministry, Viv. It's made a big difference in my ministry.
I have the belief that, and Ruby, I think you taught me something about this several years ago, to the extent that we're all stepping into our call, we're going to be creating what God is asking of us, and that's part of why this is about.
Especially as we are guided of the Spirit.
Yes, absolutely. Great.
Thank you, Viv. We're all done.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Good
you.
night, everybody. Be well.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Abundant blessings.
Yes,
Thank
you too.
you.
Good night.
So I'm gonna end the recording. And
I always struggle trying to remember how to close myself out.